Hello, and welcome to Mystic Dog Mama, the podcast for soul led dog mamas, where you'll discover how to best nourish your dog and yourself, mind, body, and soul. I'm your host, Dr. Alexia Meller. Thank you for joining me today. It's so wonderful to have you here. I hope you enjoy the birds and the wind in the background. It's such a beautiful day, and I just wanted to invite this into my space, which totally fits with today's conversation. We're continuing a bit of a theme here at the moment: energies and energetics. This week, I'm joined by Kate Troyer, a designer and Feng Shui expert who helps people connect more deeply to the energies of their spaces. If you're curious about Feng Shui and how you can use some of its principles to create a home that feels good for you and your pet, then you're going to love this conversation. In this episode, Kate and I discuss how not only is your dog your mirror, but your home is too. She shares 5 easy steps you can take to tap into your personal shui, as she puts it, and begin exploring what your home is reflecting to you, and then creating the spaces you want to experience. We also talk about how, in connecting more intentionally and deeply to the energetics of our homes, we can create safe and supportive spaces for our dogs. We also talk about how our spaces can support us through transition periods in our lives. Kate shares how she created rituals in her home with her dog in preparation for Lua's passing, and how Kate collaborated with these spaces in her home to support herself through her grieving process after Lua crossed the Rainbow Bridge. She even shares a touching story about how Lua kept up their shared meditation rituals for several months after her passing in order to help Kate through her grief, and then finally left her with a beautiful message of their soul connection. It really is such a beautiful story. We're going to jump into all of this now, but before we do, just a quick note that this episode was sponsored by Aspirationary, which, in full transparency, is another project of mine, where we create books, notebooks, and stationery to help you become all you aspire to be. You can check out our shadow work and moon magic journals and workbooks, as well as our popular My First Period tracker for young girls and tweens, on Instagram at Aspirationary, and that's spelled Aspirationery. Okay, let's go. Hi, Kate. I'm so excited to have you on the Mystic Dog Mama podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today.
I am so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh my gosh, I have been just so excited, looking forward to this day when we got this scheduled to get into all the juicy stuff around feng shui, space, energy, pets, all spirituality, all the good stuff, because we had a chat a few weeks ago and I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be so good. And I know the audience is going to love it.
I know. I've been so excited since we talked previously and ended up talking for a long time about many subjects. I was like, okay, we can definitely sit down and have a fun conversation. So I've very much been looking forward to it.
I know, I know. It was so great. I love it when you meet people like that, where just there's automatically like this sort of connection and there's like no end in sight of the things that you can talk about instead of like pulling teeth.
Yeah, exactly. It's just effortless.
Effortless. I love that. Well, I wanted to kind of introduce you to the audience as to why, as well, I wanted you to come on and talk to them, because I think this is a topic that when we say something like feng shui, people are like, well, what does that have to do with your dogs? Or what, like, what's the connection here? And for me, it's totally obvious because I think that space and energy and our relationship to space is something that we can sometimes put on the back burner, or it's kind of like an add-on or a secondary thought, when in reality it impacts so much of how we experience ourselves, and it absolutely impacts our pets. So I thought bringing this conversation to the fore might also help people with adding another layer to how they're thinking about nourishing themselves and their dogs. So I thought this would be a really great topic to kind of explore what that can look like. And we'll get into some practical details for people too about things they can be doing today in their home to better support the energy that they are generating in the home from themselves and their pets. But also talk about your experience of how you've used that specifically for your own dog as well, because I think it's a beautiful story.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think it's always, you know, like we were kind of talking a little bit beforehand, thinking of your house as an inanimate object isn't helping you or anyone or anything that lives within your space, right? And so when we're thinking more about our home as this living, breathing entity, not only that, but one whose energy is there to serve us, to protect us, to give us a solid foundation, that extends, not only just to you, but to your pets as well. And I believe that it's so important that, before we're thinking about design and decorating and all of those things, although those things are important to me, as I've been a design consultant longer than I've been a feng shui practitioner. um but I think starting with how your space is serving you. And so if you have dogs or pets, you can ask yourself, okay, how is my space also serving my pet as well? And I think that's really important to ask yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And coming from a kind of animist tradition, which is something that I'm really interested in terms of my own kind of spiritual practice, it's one where you do see that there is consciousness, that there is soul in everything. And so when you start to bring that space into the equation, like we often think about, we're going out into nature and we're recognizing like that there's a soul component to the trees and, to the animals and all that kind of stuff. But we often kind of forget that that's also the case with the things in our home. And so by extending that, we are creating just such a rich relationship in our lives as well. And looking at when we are in right relationship with our home and the things within our home, things tend to be a lot nicer as an experience in our lives generally. So I think it's an important thing to shine a light on.
Yeah, I agree very much.
So along those lines, can you tell us a little bit about what feng shui actually is and your story of how you came across it and came into it as a practitioner?
Yeah. So, what feng shui is, and I'll also kind of give my definition here because I've definitely, taken the ancient practice and made it my own. Um, but basically, I think the best way to describe it is that in its simplest form, feng shui is the awareness that your home is a mirror or an extension of your internal energy. So anything that has gone on in your life, is currently happening in your present, or you expect to go on in your future is showing up in your home. Good, bad, indifferent, it's showing up, right? And so not only can you think about the fact that your home is also something that has energy and that is alive, and like just being mindful of that, I think completely shifts the way that we live in our homes. But to go deeper and think about, oh, how is my past, present, and future showing up in the space, right? Like our homes can tell us so much about ourselves because it is our mirror. And so I think, again, good, bad, or indifferent, right? So I think that that's something. There are many nuances to feng shui. There are many different forms of feng shui. I'm a form school certified practitioner, and it's a little bit, mm, I would say that it's less strict than a traditional or a classical feng shui, where they use a compass, to figure out directions of your energy map, and their remedies are pretty. This is what you do for this problem and that type of thing. Whereas form school feng shui uses all of those ancient teachings, but with an intuitive twist. And also it's kind of formed into the practitioner's own interpretation of the practice, right? So like the way I practice, another form school practitioner could practice pretty differently. It's got all of the same, the same ingredients, but it's being thought about and studied and taught, I think, in different ways. So, for anyone that is familiar, some things that I say, you might say, well, I thought it was like this. Well, it could be because, you're comparing. There are many different forms, but those are a few of the main ones. Um, so yeah, that's kind of like, I think, a good synopsis.
Yeah, the good basics of what it is. So how did you come across it? What was your interest with that?
So it's really interesting. I can't say that I ever had like a dying interest for it until it just kind of fell in my lap one day. So I had my design consulting and home staging business for a little over 3 years. This was about 3 years ago. And everything was going extremely well. I went on a girls' trip to Florida, and we were like, okay, this is going to be like spiritual girls' trip. Like, we're not, you know what I mean? Like, we had some really cool healings done with some people, and we were getting up at like 5 a.m. every morning to do Dr. Joe Dispenza meditations, and like it was a thing, right? And the one day I came out of meditation and I was just sobbing because I was like, I just feel so disconnected. Like, I feel like there's something I'm supposed to be doing, or like, there's just more, like I just don't, in my soul, I just felt like, while I loved what I was doing and I was really, I'm very good at it, it felt like there was just like this layer missing. And I had definitely um gone to another level in my spiritual journey earlier that year, right? So I was kind of already diving deeper within myself, and I think that's kind of, probably why that was coming up for me. And later that day we were going to go sit by the pool, and I had brought this Feng Shui like course slash manual with me that I had bought, probably now at this point it's probably been almost 10 years ago. Yeah, bought it from a website, and I'm sure I just like saw it and it was like $20, like, get this course, learn Feng Shui. And I'm like, cool, sure. So I had had it printed out and like binded and everything. I've never done that with anything I've bought on a course, a book, anything like PDF wise. But for some reason, and years ago, I did this. I don't know why. I found it at my house when I was packing my suitcase. And I was like, oh, I'll just bring this with me. Maybe I'll want to read it on the plane or something, like totally just, oh, sure, we'll throw it in there. I grab it to go read by the pool. And when I open it up, there's a sticky note inside it. And I swear this is like the story. Every time I tell it, I feel like, I'm like, did that really happen to you? I find a Post-it note in it that says, teach this, in my handwriting. And I know. And at the time I was like, okay, like I just like explained it away. Like, well, I teach workshops for real estate agents because of staging. And maybe I saw this page and I don't know, but like there has to be, some reason for this. Right. And, but I definitely was like, okay, that was weird. And it was a very synchronistic weekend. So it was kind of like, wait a minute, but I also like explained it away, right? Like, okay, whatever. Because I still hadn't read much. Like, I barely knew anything about Feng Shui, like hardly anything at all. I had never read anything about it. I knew like very weird basics, and yet I've been carrying around this manual for years, and write in it. So later that day, we go to a metaphysical store. And my friend comes up to me and she goes, they have a whole section of books on Feng Shui. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. And I'm like, she's like, you have to get one. Like, you just have to. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I have to get one. And I'm looking at all of them and they all look so different. And I'm like, is there different kind? Like, what is this? So I literally bought every single book they had. I walked up to the counter with like a stack of books. And I'm just like, I don't know what I don't know. But I need all these feng shui books. Something is going on here, right? The first book that I picked up was the Western School, or not the Western School of Feng Shui, the Western Guide to Feng Shui by Tara Catherine Collins. And I read like literally the first two chapters, and I forget, it was like something that she had said in the book that I was just like, about her transitional moment, like went like into feng shui, because that's not what she was doing, and it just kind of happened to her, right? And I was like, okay, that's really, like, it gave me chills. And I just resonated with her so much as a practitioner and an author. I was like, I need to hear everything this woman has to say. Like, I'm obsessed with her, in like two chapters. I'm like, I'm just, obsessed. And so I'm like looking on YouTube, like trying to, I'm like, she has to have videos, right? The book was written in the 90s. So I'm like, I don't know. I can't find her on YouTube. And so I Google her and I see that she has her own feng shui school. And so I was like, oh, that's interesting. I look at it. You do online classes, but then you go to like basically finish in person with a practitioner in an Airbnb in Sedona later that year, like 4 or 5 months later. And my friends and I had literally been talking about going to Sedona in September over my birthday, which this was literally, the dates were literally over my birthday in September. I swear to God. And I was just like, okay, this is like meant to be. So I asked a few questions, but literally I came home from that trip a couple days later and had signed up to go to become a feng shui practitioner, like just like drop, like, okay, here we go. Made the decision to get rid of all of my staging inventory, like, and I had like a lot, like 12, 13 houses, like of every, of all the things. Decided to completely cut that part of my business. So I was like, nope, not doing anything. Was like, I'm not taking on any new clients right now. I had a couple at the time. And I'm like, all I want to do is read, breathe, like eat feng shui. Like, I was obsessed with it. And that's literally what I did. And it was interesting. It was an interesting journey. I assumed that the pivot was going to be extremely easy, because I'm like, well, I kind of already do feng shui, but I just don't, like, but it's different. Like, this is more than even what I'm doing now. And the shift was definitely more challenging than I thought. Because to me, I'm like, everyone's going to be obsessed with feng shui. This is the best thing ever. But through those challenges, I guess I realized that I was given this opportunity to learn how, through those challenges, to learn how to speak about it differently, in a way that people were like, oh my God, that makes so much sense. Like, I need to be thinking about this in my home. Whether they're full on like using all these feng shui tools, like, you can literally tap into your shui, the shui of your home, the feeling of your home, right? And shui does not mean feeling, but to me, like, that's just, like what it represents, right? It's the feeling of a space, and how you feel internally is how your home feels, and vice versa, right? So it's just like, it's something you can repeatedly be aware of and constantly be using it to better, not only better your home, but better your life. There's just so many things that I've been able to use it for in my personal life, which I know we're going to talk about, that, like, I'm what I love about it too is, like, I feel like every day or every week I become obsessed with it in a different way, or I understand it at a different level. But really, in essence, it's really because I'm understanding myself at deeper and deeper levels. And then that just translates into my external environment. Like it's the manifestation of my physical environment. And it's just like this constant thing that is mirrored back to you, which it's like, to me, that's like an invaluable relationship to have with anything. And it's like, oh, you can literally do that with your space. This thing that doesn't talk to you or anything like that, like it's that good of a mirror the deeper and deeper you go within your own practice with self and space. Like it's just, I could clearly talk about it for days.
Oh, I love this so much. I really do. And I love the notion of it being a mirror and what you brought up as well of bringing into form in this manifestation. And I think it's true manifestation. It's not like, the secret manifestation of like, yeah, I'm gonna manifest a car and all this garbage or what, like, but it's more like, what is it that we want to bring into creation? What is the creation that we are creating telling us about where we are with ourselves and how do we feel about that without judgment, right? It's just it's a neutral reflection that just allows you to get to know yourself in a different way. And I say this on the podcast all the time that one of the kind of key things that those sort of like light bulb moments that hit me in relationship to all of the dog stuff was from a book that a dog trainer named Kevin Behan wrote that was titled Your Dog is Your Mirror. And when I started looking at my dogs in general, as this mirror. It's exactly like you're talking about the home, right? They are showing you what is going on with you. And again, it's not from a judgmental perspective of even that you have to change it if you don't want to, but it's an opportunity to get into more of a right relationship with yourself. And as you get into right relationship with yourself, things change around you naturally because it's the whole concept of as within, so without. It has to be like that. As you change internally, things around you will start to change. If you've got a relationship with your dog where your dog is showing you reactivity, and I can speak to this because this is one of the situations I have with Lucky. But I then, first thing I have to look at, so what's going on with me? What's going on inside of me? And it's the same with the home, right? Whether it's that it's cluttered or it's just not reflecting who you are right now, like
Mhm.
allowing yourself to change, that it's saying to you, hey, maybe you want to look at this part of your life. So I love that whole notion that you brought up of it being a mirror and giving us that opportunity to check back in with us.
Yeah, definitely. It's just, it's the coolest thing ever. Right. And like you said, it's like, we are seeing things mirrored back to us in our environment anyway, but
Hmm.
then take it a step further and by learning how to manipulate that energy in your home to reflect something different back to you. Right. And I think especially, and I believe this is why it was so helpful for me as well as a practice, was that because of some trauma and things taking place in my early to teenage years, of childhood, I was never really in my body, right? Like I was not living in my body often, which I later learned that I had my human design chart done recently. And I learned that, like, with my, and I'm so not well versed on any of this. So if I'm saying the wrong things, like, don't come for me. I don't know. But like my gates and things like that, and my profile, and like, oh, it's totally natural that you just live in your head. Like that's where you feel super comfortable, right? Like not attached. Like you're all up here, girl, like all the time. And I'm like, oh, so maybe it's that. I don't know, but I've spent my most of my life not being very connected to my body. And the last thing that I expected from a feng shui practice is that it would help me get more in touch with my physical body. But again, when we're thinking about it, in manifestation flow, maybe we could say, right? It's like what we're thinking, what's going on manifests as our physical body, things from our past, present, and what we expect to happen in the future. And those are the exact same things that are then also being mirrored back in our home. So it's really just another extension of the body that's like this separate entity in a way. Right. And so for me, the more in touch I got with my home and the deeper I got with it, a byproduct of that was me getting more into my body and learning that. And it accidentally became like a somatic practice for me personally, right? I don't know if that's something that you could just naturally teach someone to have that type of relationship with it. But I think for me and people who have felt very disconnected or ungrounded or whatever to their physical, the practice could really help with that,
Mm.
right? So that's kind
Mhm.
of like a weird byproduct that I never expect, and like another rabbit hole I could go down, and another reason I'm so obsessed, right? Because it literally, you could bring it into any area or aspect of your life, and it
Mm.
can benefit you, you know?
Well, that makes total sense, right? Because the body is like our soul's home. It's the vehicle for us being here in the
Yeah.
incarnated experience. So it makes total sense that, in a sense, your physical home is giving you a safe place to practice what it might be like, especially if you're somebody who has disassociated from your body, because that is a trauma response, right? That's to keep
Mhm.
yourself safe. And so then, how does that help you to create a safe space in your physical body home to really fully be here? I love it. It makes total sense. It makes total
Yeah.
sense. So, what are some ways, if you could give us the kind of like basic principles of how you start to engage with feng shui for yourself or for a client, what does that kind of look like?
Yeah, so I think the easiest way is, there's something that I literally have this process that I call like tapping into your shui, right? I'm literally like writing a book on it right now. Because and it's something that for me it developed through teaching at women's retreats and workshops and different things like that, where I knew I was maybe getting a mix of people that didn't sign up just for feng shui, right? And so I never knew at what level I was getting this like classroom of people, or workshop of people. um and so I had to figure out a way to get everyone to understand it from a base level before diving into deeper principles, practices, tools, things like that, that people often become overwhelmed by when you're hitting them with these tools that have kind of weird words and is a lot of information to fully understand. I realized that what they first needed to be able to do was connect with themselves in their home, right? Because that's again, that base level of just understanding that your home is your mirror. The tools are great, but not everybody needs or wants the tools. Not everyone wants to go deeper, but understanding that at a base level. So what I used to do, and I'll try to like wrap a bow on this, but I think it's important to talk about just kind of like the process of it, because I think it will make the most sense, right? So that someone could literally listen to this and then immediately after start doing it. So it started off as a visualization slash meditation that I would take people through, going into typically their least favorite room, the room they never said, like the one that place that they hate, right? And taking them through these 5 steps. The first one being awareness, just sitting in a room and asking yourself, how do I feel in here? And making mental note, writing notes of words that come up, maybe it feels sunny, it feels good. I tell people to try their least favorite room first, because it's unfortunately usually easier for us to point out negatives and like put more words to that, which I think helps to like start understanding this. Um, so an awareness of how this, makes you feel. And then ask yourself, okay, what's the source of these feelings that I'm having right now? Is it an object? Is it a color? Is it, decor? Is it a painting? Is it the carpet that smells? Is it the pile of, whatever? Like maybe we're going through a depressed time and we've just got shit everywhere. Okay, it's the shit everywhere. It's making me feel bad. Okay, like, so you can use this as a tool to like completely upgrade a room or redo a space, but you can also use it to get yourself out of a rut or, like just not feeling good, right? So we've identified the source, and now we want to explore, okay, what would make this space feel better right now? Maybe it's just cleaning up, might just be cleaning up in that moment. It could be like, oh, maybe I could get rid of this piece of furniture, this artwork, or this picture, or I could bring in incense or this, like whatever, like what do I want to use this room for? How could this space serve me better? Like just start asking yourself those questions. Then number 4 would be like finding solutions, right? Making a list of things you actually are going to do in the space. Like what would make this room serve, what would make this room feel amazing to me and serve me at my best? What do I need to do in here? Here's my list. And then from that, you get change, right? Like commit to knocking out your list. At least commit to just do one thing on the list right now in that moment. And then stand back and notice that there is a physical, energetic change. You can see it, you can feel it. And then you can literally just work from it. You can repeat that process over and over and over and over and over again, no matter what you're doing. Like, even if you're like, okay, I want to redo a space. Okay, how do I want this space to feel? What things represent it feeling that way? What do I want to do in this space? How is it serving me? So what items need to be in here to serve me, right? This is the space I want to meditate in every morning. Okay, what do I like to have when I meditate? Maybe it's nothing. Like for me, it's like I have to have a blanket, my eye mask. I always light incense beforehand. Like maybe I want a candle going too. I need a good cozy space. Like I want my plate of certain crystals beside me. I want my journal there for when I'm done. Like, but that's me. But again, it would be different for everybody. You may be like, oh, I just like want to sit down and like in silence. That's all I need, right? So I think just having that process of tapping into your own energy and the energy of your space, and then asking yourself some questions, and then saying, because right, you can see the solutions and say, okay, these are all the things I have to do, and you can be like, I don't want to freaking do that. Okay, fine. But now you are aware of why you don't feel good in your space, right? And so then you are choosing to you know what I mean? It just, I think too, like it helps shift your mindset as well, and can also give you motivation. Like I feel like as humans, we're very curious creatures. And sometimes I at least know this to be the case for me. If I don't understand why I'm doing something, I don't want to do it. If I can't make like a deeper connection, you know what I mean? I'm just like, oh, what is that? And when that deeper connection is made, there's a click. And then I want to do something about it. I'm like, oh my God, I totally understand what the problem is now. And you don't need a professional, a designer, a decorator. You don't need someone like to tell you how you want a space to feel. Now, you may want to hire someone to help you finish off your space. That's totally fine, but you should still know how you want to feel and how the space wants to serve you before you meet with someone. Because unfortunately, not everyone thinks like me. And, like a lot of designers want to put their mark on your space. And while that's very beautiful and it looks amazing, like, is it you? Does it make you feel good? Does it serve you? Right. So that's what I think is a good starting point and something that people can just constantly play around with and then decide, okay, I want to go deeper with this.
Oh, I love that. And those are important questions that we should be asking ourselves all the time with pretty much everything, right? Like and giving
Yeah.
ourselves permission to change and say, okay, so, in the example of like a room, like, oh, I used to use it for like this and it used to make me feel this way, but I've changed or I have different needs right now. And so how do I honor who I am right now and what is it that I need? And when you're creating a kind of list of solutions that you mentioned that correlate to what it is that you want to feel and how those things can support that, it's also looking at like you don't have to do all of it at once, right? Like what are some simple changes? Like, like you're saying, maybe it is adding in a little bit of color. Maybe it's moving things around. It doesn't have to be that you're undertaking a massive design project in order to affect change. That it can just be really simple little things that you do and then notice how you feel different.
Hmm. Yeah.
No, I love that. I love that. So I also was curious in the way that you um, engage with feng shui. Do you take into account some of the traditional things like doing a Bagua map and doing that kind of, can you talk a little bit about what that would look like for people?
Yeah, definitely. So I definitely use the Bagua map. It's one of my absolute favorite tools and things to use. Like I apply it to everything, because I'm just kind of used to it now. I'm like, okay, back corner, right corner. Like, I'm just like always thinking about that kind of stuff. And you can literally put it on anything. And I think the Bagua, which you will also hear me refer to it as a home energy map again,
Mm.
because like people are like, ooh, what's a home energy map? That sounds cool, right? Versus like a Bagua what? You know what I mean? People tend to not always do well with words they can't associate meaning to. So I've learned to like play around with some of the verbiage. So I kind of use them interchangeably. Um, but what's amazing about the Bagua or the home energy map is you can literally apply it to anything, right? A bookshelf, a corner, a wall, the room as a whole, your home as a whole, just one shelf, a desk, a table, like literally anything. So if you're someone that has a hard time decorating or like not knowing what to do, but you're open enough to playing around with things and like, seeing how things feel, like you could literally use that map to kind of like help guide you if were like, okay, like this back left corner is my abundance area and I want more of that. And, or I want to hold the energy for that here. And I also, so the Bagua in general, Bagua means 8 trigrams. It's taken from the I Ching, from the 64 trigrams. But there are 9 spaces, right? So the reasoning for that is the middle most grounded area is basically seen as kind of like as you as a whole, like the health of your physical, mental, and spiritual body, in my point of view. Um, and then the other 8 areas are 8 main aspects of your life. So you have wisdom, new beginnings, abundance, fame and reputation, love and relationships, inner child, synchronicities, and your life path slash career. Now, for anyone who is familiar with the Bagua and you're like, wait a minute, she said some ones that I've never heard of before, I don't typically hear. That's because I have my own kind of relationship. Like synchronicities is often known as helpful people and travel. But its qualities are about being in the right place at the right time, being in alignment, being connected to something higher than yourself that helps you, that is that hand in your back pocket that's like, I have the next thing, I have the next thing. To me, that was always representative of living synchronistically, but I do have days where I think about changing it to alignment. I'm not afraid to like change things as I see fit, which is something that feng shui is all about, is that everything is always changing. And I'm totally open to being like, oh, I actually think alignment serves a better purpose. But anyway, So those are the nine areas, and typically you would lay it on top of your floor plan. The main level of your home, right, would be the most important. And in form school, we lay it by the direction of the front door. Now, not the direction like north, south, east, west, but rather if I'm standing outside my front door facing in, I would lay the map down on it, right? And that's how that would go. And if your home is not a square or rectangle, there could be areas that are missing from your map, or that are, I like to think of it as like leaking energy, right? Like if that square or that rectangle isn't closed off, there's an energy leak somewhere, right? And you'll often see that reflected back in your life. Um, and again, it's kind of that endless cycle, right? Like people will be like, well, this has been happening in my life before I moved into this home. Well, then that's the frequency you were on to attract it, right? Um, now there are times where things start to change when someone moves into a home, right? And I kind of see that as our homes each carry their own energetic vibration. And that's one of like just how it feels, but it's also new, like in numerology, each home will have its own vibration number, which will kind of tell you a little bit more about, how its energy is being represented, like what it's there to help you and support you with. And I find that people can also like be attracting a vibration that maybe they're not necessarily on the same frequency with, but there are lessons there, right? And those don't typically look like good lessons. Or no, I wouldn't say bad, but you know what I mean? It's not like just giving you something. It's like, no, you're going to experience the opposite of the energy I want to naturally hold for you, because there are things you need to learn, right? And our homes will show us those things. So the Bagua map, that's kind of a very brief overview. I never know how, like much to go into, because it is such a comprehensive tool. And that's not to scare anyone from using it. There's just many layers, right? And understanding it at a basic level and how to place it, and then just allowing yourself to maybe learn, play with it. Tara Catherine Collins' book, The Western Guide to Feng Shui, I recommend it to so many people. It's such a great beginner's book. And really helps you like, oh, okay, like learning those areas and things like that. So yeah, that's what I would say about the Bagua as far as like a tool.
Oh, I love that. That's perfect. And this reminds me a bit of a conversation that I had with Veronica Mazzetti Drea about human design, actually.
Mm,
So it's fun that you brought that up, that there are so many deep layers that you can go into with human design. But if you basically know like your strategy, your energy type, your profile, and as you want to go deeper into it, you can learn more about it. But if you start with the basics of even just like what is your energy type, that becomes so useful for you understanding yourself a little bit more and how you operate, how energy moves through you. And so I think you've given a really helpful overview for just even understanding that there are different really kind of like symbolic areas in the house
yeah.
as well that are asking for different types of attention from you, and they're reflecting different things back to you. So it's an invitation to be curious, as you were saying, like that lens of curiosity. You can dive as deep as you want into it, but just having that general understanding that, okay, this is reflecting, why does this keep happening? Oh, okay, it's in this corner of the house. Maybe that's an invitation for me to explore that at a depth that I'm comfortable doing.
Yeah, exactly. Again, it's like the same thing as your home being your mirror, but now we've went a
Yeah.
little bit deeper with it, right? We've went another layer deeper. And I like to think about, I think especially you could pick areas to play around with. I always think that like making sure the four corners are anchored and represented are really important, because if we're thinking about that as like a home, right? And having like our four corners, like that's kind of where we start with the frame of our home, right? And then everything else is kind of built in. So that would be like your front left, back right, front right, which would be wisdom, also known as knowledge and self cultivation. It's like how you've taken the experiences in your life and learned from them, moved on from them, moved through them, learned from them, like are at peace with them, right? Then the back left, we have abundance or wealth and prosperity. So the flow of abundance in our life, which, yes, is definitely monetary, but it's abundance of all things, right? What do you want in your life experience, basically? And you want it abundantly. Back right is our love and relationships. So not only our relationships with those close to us, our significant others, but most importantly, our relationship with self. And then that front pillar would be synchronicities or maybe alignment. And obviously about, our connection to our higher self, God, divine, universe, whatever you want to call it, something outside of ourselves that we're connected to something. And then, how we are in alignment and flow within our lives. And so to me, I think that all of the areas are obviously important, but those are to me, like I consider those like the four pillars, basically, right? And how we're using those. And so making sure that those four corners are, you've got a nice little square, and you don't have any leakages there. And that's something that you could start to just play around with. And it's more than just a corner of your house, it's an entire area, but you could start with your corners, right? It's pretty easy to do, starting there.
So what would you recommend if you're suggesting that somebody anchor those corners? What does that look like in a practice?
So I think it depends on whether those areas are missing or not, right? So if your floor plan, if you have like an L-shaped floor plan or a T, or you've got an area that like your home is not a square or a rectangle, those areas could be missing. And so if you have a missing area, doing something like the easiest thing you could do is, if you are able to do this, on your property, you can bury a quartz crystal in the corners, right, with the intention that you're squaring off the home, sealing up any leaks, et cetera, et cetera. Doesn't have to be super woo woo. It could be if you want it to be, but it could be as simple as just burying something, setting an intention. We're closing this up, and back to it. So that's probably one of the easiest things that you can do. While the pups are distracting me a little
It's
bit.
all good.
So
They have a lot to say about this.
they do. They're boy dogs, and I feel like I have a different, like, girls and boys, their energy is so different, and I've always been a girl dog person. I love them. Like, I love them to death, right? Like, but their energy is just very different.
Yeah.
I've been getting used to it this week. Um, what was I saying? I got totally
That is
sidetracked.
totally fine. Anchoring the corners. So what does that look like?
Oh,
You just
yes.
described. Yeah. So if
Yeah.
it's
So you could
missing, you can
bury a quartz crystal. If you're not able, you can also do landscaping there, like all, especially if you own the property. If you're in an apartment or a condo or something, and you don't have control over that, there's things that you could do in the corners, like you could do a crystal grid in your home. You could hang up some feng shui crystals in the corners or in the window closest to the corner to push that energy out. So several different things that you can do, to kind of, have that intention set. If those areas are missing, if they're not missing, I'm going to just throw out some really simple examples, because like, I could just, go on and on and on. But the wisdom area, since that's about knowledge, it's about, understanding your life circumstances, lessons, and moving through on from them. And also your ability to, impart that wisdom onto others. Or so if you're a teacher or you're studying something, this is also a great place to maybe put an altar or something like that. But let's say that, in that corner, around close to that corner, some sort of like a Buddha statue, if you're into something like that, is really a great symbol for that area, right? Still water, if you're thinking about self reflection, something like that. You could look up crystals for this. I am not a crystal expert. I have a friend that I call for and a book that I reference for everything. But you could look up, those type of qualities. The abundance area, a couple different things you could do on the outside or inside, but I would prefer the outside. Right on that corner of your house, you could hang a wind chime outside there, which is going to help call that energy in. Um, you could citrine. I actually know some crystals for here. A citrine, tiger's eye are two really good ones. You could put up your most expensive painting there, or something that looks luxurious to you, or like it, something like that. Also like plants or trees in that corner would be great, as it's associated with the wood element. Love and relationships. Rose quartz for that area is really great, along with things in pairs that are identical. So maybe it's like two candlesticks. I see that method used a lot with different feng shui practitioners, like two candlesticks, two pieces of art that's like a set, something like that. Things in twos are really nice. For synchronicities and alignment, I personally, something I always have in this area of my home is I have this set of these like glass blown angel wings that my grandmother gave to all the women that were close to her, like the Christmas before she passed away many years ago. And I typically will hang it on like a curtain rod that's in that room, like by the finial. So it's not like something that's just out there. It's typically something only I notice, right? But that just, to me, that connection to something higher than myself, than my grandmother, is a really nice symbol for me. So you could think about what that's, what being in alignment symbolizes to you, or something. It doesn't have to be religious, obviously, but it could be something that, represents the universe, the divine, God, something like that to you as well.
Oh, I love this. I love your approach to all of this as well, because I know that feng shui, like many practices, has specific traditional associations, like with particular things that would go in various places in order to stimulate that area or to call something in. But I also think that it's really important that, so it's like it's a both and. If that feels resonant for you, then that's perfect. But I also
Yes.
think it's really important that you do see what means something to you, because so much of these practices, and I find it's the same within my own spiritual practices, within the traditions of hedge witchcraft, animism, that kind of thing, that yeah, there are particular associations or correspondences with stuff. If you want to be doing you want to call things into your life, for example. But I actually think the most important part of anything is your intention. So finding something that feels right for you, just because they say put the color purple in this area, but you hate the
Yeah.
color purple because you've got like this particular association with it, like that's not going to do you any good, right? Like it's not
Hmm.
going to call that thing in, because every time you see it, you're like, I hate that color. So finding something that feels good for you, and it's another way of getting to know yourself and honoring yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what, I always tell people is like the Bagua is a tool, it's a guide,
Hmm.
right? And that's why I love that I chose to be certified at the Western School of Feng Shui and with that form school practice, because that's basically what it's telling us is, hey, this is our guideline. Here's something that people can use, but like go deeper with it. What means abundance to you? What represents love and relationships to you? What represents your ideal relationship, right? Like if you were someone that was trying to call in a relationship, you might write down all the things that you want in a significant other and put it in a frame, that with fresh flowers that you put by it every week or something like that, because you want to call that in. That's why everything is also we should always be thinking about how we can change things depending on what we want to call in, or what we want to keep holding space for, or keep honoring, like things that are going right. If you're in a really great relationship, or you're in a relationship and it's not that it's bad, but you guys are feeling disconnected, how can you use that area in your home to set that intention?
Mhm.
You're totally right. Like, to me, everything is intent. We give intention to everything. And if we gave no intention to it, we give no thought to something, it basically doesn't exist. Right. So, honestly, again, literally everything is made up in the grand scheme of things, right? And these are just guidelines. And I think it's really beautiful where we're coming to, and where we're headed as a society, where it's being more acceptable or celebrated to have an individual's take on things, and to kind of like be in this like DIY type of area where you're like, "Ooh, okay, like I'm interested in all of these things, and I'm going to take what I like about them, and I'm going to create my own practice within my home." And like, I'm finding that more people want to be taught about feng shui more than people want to be told what to do for the feng shui of their home. And I am freaking love that, because I've always been that person. I'm like, teach me, and then I'll just do what I want with it. Right. And that's also why it's so important to me to make the language and process of it tangible and like easier to understand. Like, it makes logical sense, right? Instead of it being like all of these overwhelming words and concepts and things like that. And it's not that you can't get there, but that's just, I can't tell you how many people I've had that have come to me that have been like, I have been playing around with, studying, reading about playing with feng shui in my home for 8 years, 10 years, 15 years. And I get to a certain point and I feel overwhelmed, I feel frustrated, da 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 da. Which, like, not everybody wants to go super deep.
Mhm.
There is
Mhm.
a space to just like, and just going deep when it feels right to you, right?
Mhm.
It's more about like just getting in touch with your space. How does this make me feel? And what would I do to make it feel better? You don't need someone else to tell you what that is. You can hire someone to tell you what that is, sure, or to help you get there. A good person will help you get there, not tell you what's wrong. They'll just ask questions, you know? Um, but yeah, I'm just seeing a shift, I think, with people, and how things are starting to just be a way of life, and it's okay to have your own process behind that.
Yeah. Oh, I love this because I was also just recently listening to I was watching a video on YouTube around human design that was talking about this big shift that we're going to in 2027. So we're already feeling the energies of it. And basically it's a paradigm shift. Like we've been in, and again, I'm not a human design expert, and so don't come after me for this. I'm just either. I'm kind of paraphrasing the what I heard and the kind of little bit of knowledge that I have about it. But when you look at your human design chart, it will tell you what the cross was, your incarnation cross. And we have
Yeah.
these large periods of time. It's like 400 or 500 years that we as a world are in a particular kind of cross. And 2027 marks a shift into another one. And the shift we're going into, which I think is so interesting that you're bringing this up, is about an individualistic perspective on things. And what I was understanding that these human design teachers were talking about is that when you look at this the kind of place that we've been in with these big systems of like even capitalism and communism they brought up as examples of it, globalization. Like there were these big overarching perspectives on how everything is connected. And now we're shifting into a space where the individual is looking at more so like, what is supporting me? How does my energy work? Kind of disconnecting from these big systems that don't necessarily work for us or serve us or attempting to homogenize us, and actually saying, okay, so what have I learned from that that I can then take into my personal journey? And how do I seek out what is best supportive of my individual expression in this incarnation? So I think you're absolutely right with what you're picking up on. I think it's reflective because I've
Mhm.
heard this out. I mean, I'm giving you the example of the human design stuff that I've heard, but
Yeah,
I've heard this echoed by spiritual teachers from all different perspectives about this period that
yeah,
we are in. So it's really, yeah, I think you're really spot on with what you're noticing.
yeah. And that's so exciting to me too. On so many levels, because it's living an experience through expression instead of not living,
Right.
you know?
Yeah. Instead of like indoctrination, this is how you're supposed to live, but you figuring out
But
what does
you
that
don't
look
end
like to
up
me?
living though. You don't
No.
live, you don't maybe you live but you don't experience, or you're alive but you don't experience. And I think that's something for me that like I started asking myself several months ago, what do I want my life experience to be? Like I've shared with you where I was, really feeling some stagnancy everywhere in my life, at every point, at every turn. And I'm like, what the heck is going on? Well, and I started to be like, instead of thinking about how I didn't want that, I was like, well, what do I want my life experience to be, right? And what's so what's so cool about that is not only like asking myself that question, but what I ended up finding was that it was different than like I kind of thought it would be. Like when I really could think about it without considering anyone but myself,
Hmm.
which is, I know, a luxury that not all of us are afforded. But I don't know, I think it's really, really interesting when we start, not only that we're going to see more and more people living a life of experience, but how cool that like collectively as a society, excuse me, a society, we're all kind of coming together and saying like, yeah, like I want to do that too. Like that's it's slowly becoming the norm, right? And I just think that's so exciting.
It is so exciting. And it's also that idea of, yes, it's about us living experience. And it's recognizing that as we live our unique experiences and our unique truths, we are contributing to this fabric of existence, right? That's part of, in my belief, that's part of what we're here for, right? It's to find yourself in your true expression and be that in the world. And that is your contribution,
Yeah.
right? That's kind of what we're here for. So that's really exciting. But I also wanted to dive into a bit. So we've talked about how our homes are our mirrors for us and how we can start to shift energies for us. How do we take into account our pets as well? Or whether, obviously we're focused on dogs, but this is for all pets as
Yeah.
well. Like, how do we consider the animal companions that we have in our lives and support a space, the creation of a space that supports them as well?
Yeah. So, one, I think, figuring that out for self first, I think kind of helps take care of the pets a little bit, right? Because they're feeling our energy and they're experiencing our energy and mirroring that back to us. So, when we're able to get more right with ourselves and our environment, it's naturally, in my opinion, improving, your pet's experience in your home. But then I would say just things like, and again, sometimes this is going to come back to you, but like having the food and storage and the everything like you need for your pet, right? Like having that in an accessible, easy place for you, right? That makes it it's easy, right? Up, all the things are here to make the food, to do this, to fill the water bowl. It also is not making a mess everywhere. It's also in a space that I'm not tripping over, or, everyone's having to walk around, like just little things like that. You can think about that with a toy basket, with a bed, with a crate, right? Because here's the thing, like think about it like this. Let's say that you have this dog crate and you have a large dog, so it's a big dog crate, and you have it in the middle of your living room and you're just like, God, I hate that there. It looks awful. You apologize every time someone comes over because you hate the way it looks. But so that's the energy that you are giving the dog crate and the space that it's in. And now your dog goes in there. Like, and I'm going to bet that your dog doesn't happily go in it, right? Because that's not the energy that is being given to it. It's not that there's anything wrong with the dog crate. It's where you have it, and the fact that where you have it isn't serving you.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I think that it's more thinking about it in those terms. Um, and obviously, I think, like thinking about your pet having a place in the rooms that you like to be in, and that the dog likes to be in with you, right? Like, if you're always in your living room or whatever, like, what is your dog like? Like, my dog that I had, like, I bought her a million beds in her lifetime. She never used them. She liked to lay on the floor on and I'm a rug person, so like always on rugs, or she was like, on top of blankets and pillows. Like she just liked to, like snuggle into stuff. But never slept in any bed that I got her, right? So then I stopped buying her beds because she did not use them. And they became annoying to me because I'm like, you have this bed and you don't use it, right? But I always thought about like when I would meditate in the morning, like she was like my little meditation buddy. She got up with me. We didn't go outside or anything. She just would wake up, stumble into the living room with me, and she would lay right in front of my chair, right? And just be out. And that was like our thing, right? So it was like, well, there needs to be a rug in the room that I meditate in because Lua likes to lay here and sleep, and she likes something soft and cozy, right? Or I would have like one of her blankets down on the floor, like in the winter, because she would like to snuggle up in it. Just little things like that. I don't think we need to like, make this like this big thing and like, oh, you need to do all of these crazy things for your pets, right? But, obviously them having a clean, safe, you know, place to live that feels nurturing to them. And then thinking about what does my pet do in here? Or like, a lot of times it's things that like annoyances of your pet, right? That like make you think of like, okay, well, they're always doing this. They're always dripping water all over the floor after they drink. Maybe I need to get a mat to put their stuff on, right? Like a bigger one. Or maybe I need to move it so that it can be on a bigger mat and it's not an eyesore to me. And, I think those just little things. And making sure too, again, that we're like spending time, like just like spending time with our space, being connected to our space. I think doing things, having some sort of a routine with our pet based on their needs and wants or likes, right, is really special because they get to experience in a lot of ways through us.
Mm-hmm.
Just like the universe or God gets to experience through us as physical beings, like our pets kind of get to experience through us because they are a mirror of our energy and they're so in tune with our energy, And so I think, again, thinking about self, but then if there are things that make you take your dog on a walk more often, or again, make it easier to feed them, or, just little things like that. I think that's a really good place to start.
Oh, I love that. And it also makes me think about the different parts of our home in from a kind of like vertical perspective too, that we spend time and place our energies, that we as
Yeah.
humans tend to stay within, say, like the middle of the room to the higher parts of the room, right? But especially with dogs, they invite us to the ground. So getting on the ground with your dog and experiencing your home from that perspective, from that vantage point, but also you're shifting the energy when you're playing with your dog on the floor. You're creating a different energy at that level of your home. And some people talk about how one of the roles that animals play in our home is that they are kind of like energy cleaners at those lower levels because that's where they live. They're constantly on the floor. They're at a lower level than we tend to inhabit. So they
Mm,
automatically shift energy for us. But then what happens when we get down to those levels with them? What happens to our personal energy? How are we then, especially when you're at play with your dog and there's a lot of love and you're creating that kind of energy at those levels? How does that then infiltrate through your home? And I think that's just something interesting, as well as from a comfort perspective. If you're like, I hate getting on the floor because I hate this rug, or the floor is always cold, and so you're not getting down on the floor with your dog
right.
because of that. So in the same way that you're thinking like, oh, they're dripping water everywhere, I need something here, but also what would make it more comfortable for you to be down
Mhm.
there and engage with your animal in that way?
Yeah, definitely. I love thinking about that. I'm so glad you brought that up. Like thinking about the energy kind of settling on the floor, right?
Yeah.
Or on these lower spaces, where they're experiencing that energy deeper
Hmm.
or in a different way than we are. Oh,
Hmm.
love that.
Yeah, no, definitely. And it's not something I necessarily thought about until I got a dog. And then
Yeah.
realized like how I was engaging with space a lot more differently
Mhm.
just as a byproduct of engaging with him. And especially Lucky's small. I mean, he's a 10-pound Chihuahua mix, so he never gets high. And like, I mean, he gets on the furniture, but like his space is completely low to the ground. So I have to go and meet
Yeah,
him low on the ground, which is kind of fun.
I love that.
I wondered if you could talk a little bit too about how you started looking at your home a little bit differently as your dog Lua was getting ready to transition and how you supported her through that process by supporting her with space. And then also after her transition, how you supported yourself with your space as well.
Yeah, so I think this is again, now I had the opportunity, I guess, to make the decision on when this was happening. And I have to say that if you are able to do that, one, you will never feel ready, but I think it makes the transition so much easier for both your dog or pet and you. It's obviously like one of the worst decisions that we have to make, but we know that owning pets, that's something that, we will probably have to face at some point. And I think for me, that one thing was like not letting it get to a place where something traumatic was going to happen, because then that would be like, to me, that would then be like my last memory and her last memory is this traumatic event. And so that was why I was like, okay, like I don't want to wait until like I feel like I know it's a good time, because that's never going to happen. And I need to go with my gut instinct and know that it's time. So I gave, I think, about 2 weeks that I knew, maybe like 10 days, but it was like right around, that time frame. Um, and there were a couple things that I did. One was every night I made dinner, and I made dinner for both of us. Right, like we had surf and turf and seafood, and literally like all of her favorite things, which are kind of like my favorite things too. Like that girl loved seafood. So we had like all different kinds of seafood and steak and everything like that. But even, one that was kind of fun to like cook for both of us and think about it like in that way, right? And two, now she didn't sit at the table with me, but like I sat with her or by her or near her and we like ate together. Right. And that was something that I was like, man, I wish that I would have like done this beforehand, because I liked, especially, being someone that was like single and it was just her and I living there. It made like dinner time more special, like I think for both of us. And that was something that I'm like, oh, I want to like be mindful of this with my next dog, right? So that was one thing that we did. And the other thing was I she didn't typically like to sleep with me. She would maybe get up at like the end of my bed or whatever as for a long time, as long as she could. And then she would always like lay on the ground because she was extremely protective of me. Um, but she couldn't get in the bed. And it was like, I don't know, she didn't like it as much in there. So we had a slumber party for a week and a half, right? Where I slept on the couch, and she slept right beside the couch, like on her blanket or whatever by me. And, we just like, I did little things like that with her. She wasn't super, we went on short walks. And she had all of her toys and things like that that she loved. But mainly I tried really hard to not let myself get emotional about it then. Like I definitely had my moments, but for the most part, I just really tried to be mindful about how present I was being with her and like out loud or, in my head, like thanking her and thinking about all of the good things that she brought into my life. And that to me was like, I think that made a huge difference when the day finally came and then the healing after that, because like I had acknowledged the part that she played in my life for 14 years. And that was really important. Again, I had time to do that. And I get that not everyone gets that chance. Um, but that was something. And then something that I found to be really important was, the day that I took her to her appointment, I made sure I removed literally everything. Like, and I mean like day to day stuff, right? Her food containers, her bowls, like all of her toys, except for like one that was like her favorite. And I put those to the side. I didn't want to come home and see all of her stuff there. Like, because even though like we have this natural desire in us as humans to hang on to things and attach ourselves to physical things when something we love is gone. But if we're being honest with ourselves, like it's not there anymore. Like, and we need to kind of, maybe this sounds harsh to some people, um, but I knew that like seeing that stuff just as one reminder, I was like, no, like she is not physically here anymore. And I need to like be real with myself about that. Right. So like I don't need all these, like it doesn't need to look like it did when she lived here. And I know that maybe that can sound harsh and maybe not everyone, do what feels good to you, but I knew that that would help me in the long run, even though I didn't necessarily want to do it. I wanted to be like, no, I want to come home and be like, like attached to this water bowl that was hers. Like it's a water bowl, but it's so easy for us to do that. So I was very mindful about that and said, I know that this is basically like, gonna mess with my head if I come home to this. So it needs to be out of here and I need to just make that decision. And then like you mentioned what I did afterwards. I think it's really important to honor the things that we are grieving about, whether that's a pet, whether that's a relationship, whether it's a person, a situation, like whatever that is, and honor the things, the energy, the things that it taught us, that it brought us, and especially with the pet, like pushing down our grief doesn't make it go away. It just makes it come up at a later time, and sometimes we don't know in what form we're going to get that in. So allowing yourself to remember but not attach, I think, to an object. So I created an altar in my living room, just on my little side table. It was like a picture of her and I, her favorite stuffed animal, her favorite little ball named Greg, who she had literally had for like 8 years. Like, I don't know how this little tiny white ball like moved from house to house. We always ended up finding it. Like, one time found it outside at my dad's house after a year of it being gone. Like, it was literally, I still have it. It has a name, Greg. Greg was the ball. And I think I had like an oracle card, and just some other little things that reminded me of her. And I had that in my living room for quite a while, for probably a good couple months. And then it got to a day where I was like, I saw it, and it was like I was holding on, I was attaching to it. And that's when I was like, I need to move this into another room. They don't need to see it every single time, like multiple times a day, because now I'm not honoring, I'm attaching. And so then I moved it into my meditation room, just on one shelf of a bookshelf, or really kind of like, it started as one whole shelf. And then before I moved out, it was kind of like a third of the shelf, and now all of it's packed away. And, it's interesting, when I was packing stuff away, obviously I have a place that I'm staying for at least, a couple, 2, 3 months. And I have some things out. And when I was packing stuff, I kind of had baskets for things I was going to keep out, and I boxed up everything else. And I originally was going to keep all her stuff out, even the picture of us. And I ended up deciding to pack it away. And I had some, like, this is the part I'm going to get emotional about. I had some really deep curiosities about that. Like, at first it was like, oh, I can't pack this away. Like, I don't want her to think I forgot her. And it's like, it's just a picture of us. Like, I'm more connected to her after her passing than I have ever been. I know I've shared that story with you, and how she came and sat with me in a meditation. And after she passed away, she literally came and meditated with me every single day, for months. And it became normal. Like, she was actually there. It was wild to me. I'd never quite had that type of like such a visceral experience like that regularly. And it just became so normal. And then, I know I've shared this with you. I won't share the full thing because it's rather lengthy. But anyway, along with my grandparents, she came and sat with me in meditation, just I like could just see it so clearly. It's seriously wild. And basically thanked me, and told me that as much as she was here to help me, I was there to help her. And like, literally, basically, like, was like, this was our contract. Like, this is what was happening. And that, she wasn't going to be coming to sit with me every day anymore, which was like, still kills me. But if I ever needed her, she was always there. But that part of my reason for being in her life, and even the deep connection that we shared for several months after she had passed, was like part of her journey. And she related it to me like, on the movie It's a Wonderful Life, where Clarence the angel gets his wings. And she, like, literally, like, that's one of my all-time favorite movies. And that's the reference that that I received from her. And it was like, in that moment, I also like had this full realization of like how our souls move through levels as well. Because the way I understood it was like, I'm not, because I always like for years, I would be like, Lua, you're coming back to me and my next dog. Okay. Like, we got this. You're just going to keep coming back to me over and over and over again in a different, in a slightly different form. Like, we got this. Like, you're my soul animal. And I truly believed that. I was like, of course, she's just going to keep coming back to me. Like, that's how connected we are. And so then when I received that from her, for a moment that like broke my heart, because it was like, no, you have to keep coming back. Like, what are you talking about? But then realizing how selfish that was, right? Like, I don't possess her, or her soul or her evolution. And like, I'm part of her evolution, like her role with me and my role with her. The way I received that message, or that conversation with her, I guess to say, was that like, I'm moving on now. Like, I'm going to be, maybe she comes back as human now. I don't know how that works. None of us really do. But it was that she had like evolved into this new thing. And yeah, so it's like, ever since then, I had to be really mindful about not being in limerence with her or her energy or what we had. And I think that's part of like why fully packing her stuff away, because it's like, okay, I know I can get it out. Like, this for me is, where I'm at currently in my life is temporary, but like, maybe I don't need to bring it into this new temporary space. Like, it's okay for us to let things go.
Mm-hmm.
Which is hard to say and even harder to practice, but it's really true. Like, it's okay for us to let things go physically,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, I think it's a really important point you make, that the physical things they just serve as touchstones for us, or reminders of the emotions, the memories, etc. And we don't necessarily need to have them. And your whole process of kind of dealing with that is such a beautiful way of putting into practice what you've been talking about, of how do you sit with and explore how a space is making you feel, and what is it reflecting back to you, and when do you need to make changes to best support your own evolution. And then in the case of Lua, in letting things go, letting her go on to her next evolution, whatever that looks like as well. So a gift for both of you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Right. I'm creating a whole lot of new space in my life. And part of that is fully letting go of that, right? Of her
absolutely.
in that way.
In that way
But
is the key part.
knowing that like the connection we have is like totally different, right? Yeah, and being okay with that.
Hmm.
It's not all about me and what I want to, like we get very selfish with that, and it's normal. It's part of being human, but I think there's something really magical in seeing it differently and allowing that space,
Hmm.
um for something new to come in.
Totally. Totally. Oh, this is so beautiful. If somebody wants to learn more about how they might be able to work with you or learn from you, or just follow your explorations of this new adventure that you're on in your life
Yeah.
and what that's going to look like, how can somebody engage with you?
Yeah, so I think probably the best way would just be to go to my website, homesliceliving.com. And even from like, you'll see services, how you can work with me, or just from the home page, there's links to all of my socials. I would say that at least right now, I am most active on TikTok. That's where I'm typically sharing things. Although I've kind of went through a little social media slumber the last few weeks. But yeah, that's typically where you can grab that. If you sign up on any of my social platforms, you can sign up for my newsletter. or like I call it my weekly slice, right? So it's like a weekly email that I put out, which kind of keeps you, in the know and gives little tips. And well, also, if you are, hoping to have my book finished and published by the end of April. So that's my goal right now. We'll see if that happens. I might do a workbook first and then the book, or the other way around. I kind of have both working, and so I'm kind of playing around with it. But yeah, if you're curious about that, make sure you get on my newsletter. But
Ah, super exciting. And I'll leave a link to your website in the show notes so people can contact you directly from there.
yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much for having me. This
Oh
has
my
been so
gosh.
awesome.
This is so amazing. And I have just one last question that I ask all of my guests.
Okay.
And that is, what do you feel like Lua or other dogs that you've experienced have taught you about what it means to be human?
Oh my goodness. Who? Okay, you're gonna get me with this one. I'm trying to figure out how to word this and put a nice little bow on it and not go into this crazy long explanation. But I think what she taught me was how I could create love and safety for myself within myself,
Mm.
because she was always the thing that protected me. And I totally understand that part of her being in my life was for protection. Like I literally needed that energy and the loving energy. And I didn't fully grasp any of that until after she had passed. And then I kind of looked back on our 14 years together and just was like, "Oh, wow." And I'm so grateful for the last few months that we spent together were actually just like her and I, because I got to experience this deeper level of getting to know myself and going through a transition and a challenging time. Um, and there were, I don't know, there was just, yeah, I'll leave it at that. I would say that cultivating safety and love within myself, protection, yeah,
Who could ask for a better gift, to be honest?
I know.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you, Lua, for being present through this whole interview. Oh, Kate, this has been so amazing. And I think it's going to offer people some really fun ways of thinking about their space and how that is reflecting what it is that they really want to see in their lives and in themselves, and how they can also be considering their pets and all that. So I think it's going to really help a lot of people. So thank you for being so vulnerable and sharing your story as well with Lua. I'm so grateful.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Alexia. Like I love our conversations and
I do
thank
too.
you for having
I
me.
do too. So grateful. Take care of yourself.
Thanks, you too. I'll talk to you soon.
I really hope you enjoyed this conversation with Kate Troyer of Homeslice Living about the importance of connecting with your own energy and the energy of your home. I hope it has given you some food for thought, as well as some ideas on how you might develop a deeper connection with the spaces you engage with on a regular basis, and that your dog engages with. You can learn more about Kate and her practice by visiting her website, homesliceliving.com. I've left that link in the show notes. If you have a particular topic you'd like me to cover in a future episode, or you'd like me to reach out to a particular guest, I'm all ears. Just send me a message on Instagram at Mystic Dog Mama. All right, until next time.